Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to Data Fundamentals Unpacked. We have a special episode and a special guest. Welcome Daniel Bishop to our party here, co-founder of Think Data. Daniel, give everybody a good old wave.
Hello, hello, hello.
Also, I have two of my data fam here with me today, Jenny Von Corder and Bill Shander. So excited to be with y'all, and also a little bit sad because the last time we were together talking, we were on a stage together in person, which was a lot of fun, but we'll talk about that. Bill, tell everybody about you.
All right. Hey, everybody. I am Bill Shander. I am a data visualization practitioner. And actually, the title I usually use is information designer. So I take information and I design it. Love talking about data, love talking about communications and where those intersect. And always excited to be here with Robin and Ginny. And today, Daniel. So thanks for having me.
Jenny, tell everybody about you.
I'm loving Bill's description of being an information designer. That's really sexy. That's a great title. I would want that on a card. You know what I mean? I struggle to tell people what I do. That's a great description of what you do. It's just spot on.
Yeah.
I'm Ginny Von Corder, and I mostly work these days as a trainer. I spend a little bit of time as a practitioner in the data space, but I'm mostly a trainer, and a lot of my training is around Power BI and the Microsoft Power Platform. So that's what I bring to this conversation.
That's awesome. Yeah,
and I have to actually say I do more training these days than actual practicing too. So
I'm a mix. I'm a mix.
You are a mix.
Yeah.
I purposefully choose to practice more than train. It keeps the sweat down for me.
Yep.
Public speaking is a thing, right? So you either really love it or you just black out through it. Either way. Awesome. So I want to talk about our building the data workforce event and what led us here to this episode today. And it's actually called Dealing with Technical Difficulties, because after our event, we actually experienced a technical difficulty. So before we get into unpacking technical difficulties, I just would love to hear from you guys about your experience coming into the Magic City and what you thought about the event, and what did you learn, and were there any key takeaways? So who wants to go first?
I'll go first since I'm from the Magic City, and Jenny and Bill came in and graced us with their presence. But Bill actually brought new info to me about Birmingham, and I was just one of the hot spots to get a good burrito. So that was fun.
Absolutely the truth.
Yeah. So I'll expand on that just because you brought up burritos, so now I have to talk about burritos for like 10 minutes. So for those of you who don't know, 538, the website, did something called the burrito bracket years ago, where they analyzed data of the thousands of places that sell burritos all across the country. And based on that, they narrowed it down to the top 64 burrito joints across the country. And they sent a journalist around to try burritos at every one of these places and narrowed it down to 16 and then to 4 and to the best burrito in America. And as a burrito fan, every time I'm anywhere, I look it up and see if there's one of these joints there. And I've so far visited a little bit over half of them, so 30 plus of these places. Birmingham was one that I had not been to before. And yes, it was very fun and exciting to try another one on the list. And it was a good burrito, I have to say.
It was good.
Yeah, so I loved coming to Birmingham. I had been there once before, many, many, many years ago. Just like I was out in the burbs somewhere. Can't even remember, it was like an office park. I didn't really see Birmingham at all. So really seeing the downtown area, getting more of a feel for what the city's like was really cool. Visiting the Vulcan, or I guess just Vulcan, not this Vulcan for those of you who are confused. I know I was. There's a really big, giant statue just on the sort of the edge of town of the Greek Roman god Vulcan. Yeah, right there behind Robin. So that was really cool. And then the event was awesome, talking about the data workforce and sort of, where it's going and all these opportunities. And we're going to talk, I'm sure, more about that. I'm sure Robin's going to give us the sort of fill in on the key information, which was really awesome to learn about and to learn more about what Think Data Solutions is doing for the data workforce in Alabama in particular. But I had a great time. And, we had this technical difficulty, which we're going to talk about, which is a bummer. But my memory of the event was just, it was awesome. And I can't wait till we do another one together.
Oh, me too. Me too. Jenny?
Yeah, Bill and I got out before the screaming started. So we left happy.
Yeah.
I'd been to Birmingham for business a couple of times. I'd been to Birmingham to visit the Civil Rights Museum, which is a fabulous civil rights museum.
Absolutely.
In Birmingham.
Yeah.
As part of a civil rights pilgrimage a couple of times. And I discovered I had a barbecue connection to Daniel that was super cool. So we had all these nice pieces, but so this was a really great event. And I don't know how much, Robin, I might be just kind of stealing what you intended to say.
Go
but
ahead.
This was an event that included members of the business community. It included government folks, both locally and state level government folks who are involved in training up the workforce, and all kinds of folks who have been through the training at Think Data Solutions. So there was a really good crowd, and there were kind of two things during the day put together. And one was to have a panel, Data Fundamentals Unpacked panel. But before that, the thing that was cool was Robin did this great presentation about the workforce in sort of the counties near where she is, but the statewide workforce. And, in some ways, Birmingham is a lot like Flint, Michigan, where I grew up, and in, a town that was an industrial town. And then what do you do sort of in a post-industrial time to figure out how you want to keep people employed so that they can feed their families, have good health care, all the things that we all want to have for ourselves and the people we love. And so I was really struck afterwards, not necessarily as much at the time, but I was struck afterwards about Think Data Solutions really end-to-end approach to think about upskilling people. I was involved formerly in trying to upskill people in Flint, and I have some great and weird stories about that. But just the idea that we think about the number of jobs that we know are available in data. I mean, all the time there are people looking for folks who can do a good job in this industry, but it's not something that you can just step into like some of the jobs we had when we were in more of an industrial age. We're in a post-industrial age. And so the goal now isn't just to show up on time and punch a time clock and learn a fundamental job and leave. The job is to upskill yourself so that you qualify for the kinds of jobs that you don't need to hit a punch card, a punch clock. You can often set your own hours. You can often work remotely. So better jobs, often at a higher wage, but certainly close to the same kinds of wages that we had. And I hope that Robin's going to spend some time now talking about like the vision of what can we do when we have folks who need to be upskilled in order to provide what they need, not just when they're adults, but from a very young age. How do we make everybody data smarter all the way up the path so that they can participate more easily in our economy now?
That's awesome. Yeah, I loved that presentation and enjoyed working, because you came into the venue and we had the timeline and history of Think Data prior to standing up and doing that statewide informational presentation. It was fun to go through our history and realize that as 13 years of building Think Data, we have been preparing and positioning to be able to do what we were announcing at that event was to create or to basically announce that we have established a national and state registered apprenticeship for data apprenticeship. So it was exciting to go through that. I, was really compelled by the fact that we have such a huge growth in data analytics professions. anticipated. And it's like it's a lot. Like I've got it right here in front of me. As a matter of fact, we'll grow 25% more by 2030. So we already have a lot of unfilled positions, and now we have an unrealistic to keep up with growth rate coming. But even more so than that is the understanding that 1 out of 3 of our workforce, according to the United States labor statistics, is that they don't have digital literacy skills. So 1 out of 3, no digital literacy. How do we even keep up with any type of growth rate in a technical role if we have a population that isn't digitally literate? And then inside that component of people who may not have those digital literacy skills, 58% of them are working in jobs that require digital literacy skills. So it's kind of like, you don't have them. We already know you need them. And now we're producing and predicting positions that will remain unfilled if we don't get strategic about how we fill those positions. So I don't know. It's exciting. It was really just a lot. I look forward to doing that presentation again, and perfecting it, because I don't think people, when they think of 1 out of 3, just in general data, when they see that, I don't know that they can really recognize what that looks like in our population and the numbers of people. We also talked about the importance of meeting people where they are. So in our state, the majority of our working age population do not have college degrees. But a majority of the roles that are remaining unfilled have college degree requirements. But they're not roles that can't be filled by people with skills. Right. So the world has already started to adopt and change to a skills-based model already. So I think building our boot camps in and around having that knowledge can kind of help us mitigate some of the challenges for our workforce we face, because we don't have the degreed population to fill the need.
Are you saying like that the job descriptions haven't caught up with the reality of what people need to be able to do the jobs?
Oh, I haven't even gotten there yet. Yes, but yes. the job requirement, like there's mandatory requirements, right? It's like, and sometimes, and people who are actually pursuing these roles, they can confirm this. It's like, here's an entry-level data role. Do you need 10 years of experience and a doctorate? And when you get here, we're going to give you no access to information, and you're going to only be able to use Excel. You know what I mean? It's just completely, it's just a lot to unpack on that.
So that's dealing with technical difficulties at the onset of your employment then. That's a technical difficulty.
It is technically difficult.
Yeah, definitely. Jenny, it was good for me to hear you start off by saying how you received the event, because that was the first part of it before you guys had the panel discussion. The goal was to take people through like the journey of Think Data, on how every step that we've made has kind of just like, we wanted the audience to agree with us that we were firmly positioned to do what we're trying to do with the apprenticeship program. And so hearing you say that means that our presentation accomplished that. So that was good to hear. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I do think we're uniquely positioned in our market for sure, and in other markets. I mean, obviously, as company owners of Think Data, we want to be able to expand our reach to as many people as possible, but we're starting here at home. We do also believe that technical certification is a great way to confirm competency. So as we work with our apprentices, they will be gaining not only the skills and competency they need, but they're going to also have possibilities to get certification in data. So they'll definitely become more digitally literate. They'll definitely become data literate. And then our goal, obviously, is to build a very data fluent population here in our workforce. So we're hoping by having that nationally recognized data apprenticeship, we're able to do that. Work with our clients who need to have apprentices, because that's also like, why are the job descriptions so bad? Well, it may be not that they're bad. It's just nobody's matched up the competency and skill to the job description of what people really need for the early entry. Like, we have to prepare for the future. So yeah, you have job roles right now that have data professionals you need right now that have mid to senior level skills. That's great for right now, but the ability to process data, make decisions from that data, you've got to be building a workforce, a data program, data apprenticeship from the ground up right now to be able to keep up, so that 5 years from now, when we have explosive amounts of data that we can study and capability and capacity through tools, that you have people that can actually leverage it in your workforce and that understands your company.
Yeah,
So I'm looking forward to doing that.
The certification piece of the program helps for the employer of identifying a baseline, because like with the job descriptions, you have data analysts, and it's relatively new to the workforce, and you have data analyst at one company and a data analyst at another company, and from the HR department, they're seemingly the same role, but one person may be doing a totally different job function than the other one. So when you're hiring people, without that certification, with this new, data analyst role, a data engineer, a data scientist, it's hard to kind of shore that
up. One of Devrim Ozdemir asked, when we talk about data literacy, it's right there. What are you referring to? Like, what's Think Data's definition of data literacy that a third of folks are lacking?
So that 1/3 statistic is just digital literacy. It doesn't even get to data yet.
Oh,
okay. So the 1 out of 3 is in the digital literacy domain. But for the way we define data literacy, yeah, obviously you need to be able to read data, right? I don't know how far in statistical analysis I would include for a literacy component, but I mean, basically, you need to be able to understand, central tendencies like mins and max and totals and the center of data, stuff like that. You don't have to go too far. So I don't know that I would say data literacy would include a high level of statistics, because that scares people anyway. But data fluency, again, is just another category where you're going to build those skills. So our boot camps are designed to take you at whatever point you need to be. You have assessment capability that puts you into the right place, may it be digital literacy or data literacy, so that we can build out those particular functions and specialities. That's another thing too. Like, when you're at the beginning of your data career, you don't really know where you fit. Like, if you'd have talked to me at the very beginning and asked me, where are you going to find yourself on your data journey? I don't know that I would have said, oh, I'll be data analyst. I wouldn't have known that at the very beginning. I would have been like, what data career? I'm just the weirdo using Excel in the corner right now. So I think having programs that identify aptitudes and then pass you into the lanes you belong in make a lot of sense. And so we've spent a lot of time in the design of competencies and assessments and helping people along the way with that.
Go ahead.
I can tell you that, and I'm going to botch the actual words here, but MIT had a really good definition for data literacy, which I talk about a lot, but it's something to the effect of, it's the ability to read, access, I think, read, work with, and make sense of data. And so, I usually simplify it and just say it's the ability to think about and do stuff with data. So it's the ability to see a chart or to read a table of numbers and sort of understand what it means, and then to make decisions with data, and even to do some basic data analysis. And as you said, Robin, it's on a spectrum. Listen, at one end of the spectrum, you have first graders, right? 1 + 1 = 2. That's data literacy, in a very basic way. At the other end of the spectrum is a data scientist, and we are all somewhere on that spectrum. And so if you're a data worker, if you're on day 1 of your data working journey, you're going to be closer to the first grader, hopefully a little bit further down the line, but not that much, right? Yeah, I know what the difference between mean and median is. Okay, that's good. That's a really important one to know pretty early on in your career. And at the other end of the spectrum, you can do crazy, complicated stuff. Wherever you are, that's the amount, that's sort of like the level of work you'll be able to do in the data world. But it doesn't stop there. This is not static, right? You can always
Right.
be upskilling and improving, which is what this is all about.
Yeah.
Or you end up in an interesting rabbit hole and you decide you want to live there. I mean,
Yeah.
I really didn't understand probably until the last 5 or 6 years how much I love data modeling.
Mm.
I really, because I started as a developer. So to get to the point where it's like, I really love data modeling. That when Daniel said, I spend more time as a practitioner. If I have my choice about practice, it's always modeling. That's what I love, but I would never have known that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a key point.
Right. Yeah, and at the very beginning, if you'd have said one day there's going to be a world of jobs where data modeling is going to be all the thing, I would be like, what? Because back then you did all your modeling in tools like SQL, right? And not everybody had access to those back end to model anything. They couldn't write queries in anything. So that's to Bill's point of being a wide spectrum and you never stop. Well, all of us have picked up new tools from the very beginning. I also believe this is where we have that complicated digital literacy piece, because tools have changed so much. Like about the time you think you've got one mastered, something new comes around, either as a feature inside that particular software or a whole new software, or all of a sudden now there's a whole new platform. Like it's a constant state of change. I think that's one thing I also like about our model is not only are we confirming digital literacy skills and we're building data literacy and all the way to fluency and analysis and even back end design, we're teaching people how to learn in this world where you're going to have to learn constantly to stay relevant and on top of things. And I just feel like it's really valuable to have senior leadership being willing to come in and teach fundamentals and teach how we've all survived our technical careers. And so if that ends up being apprentices, go ahead, Bill.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, talking about statistics. So 1 out of 3 people aren't digitally literate, which means, yeah, they don't know how to use digital tools, right? That's a problem. To the point that Ginny made, and you alluded to it, the number of people who are not data literate is way higher. So I saw a poll, it's probably about 2 years old now, the survey. And in this survey, 76% of business decision makers are not data literate by self-reporting. They said they are not data literate themselves. So 3 out of 4 of the leadership in companies don't consider themselves data literate. So yeah, 1/3 aren't digitally literate, which is a huge problem. And it's 3 out of 4 are probably even worse among people who think they're actually data literate. Now, some of them are probably a little bit more data literate than they realize, but yeah, there's a huge gap there that needs to be improved.
Yeah, and we've been failing our people by the assumption that we make that they know tools because they grew up in them.
Yeah.
We're particularly failing our younger generation with these assumptions, but these assumptions have been damaging to our current workforce. I'll give you a prime example of it before we talk about students. It's, people will say, I don't need Excel training because they look at it all day long.
Right.
Leadership says, we hire people with these skills. And I'm like, how do you know? And what's your skill compare? Are you comparing them to somebody that just knows how to open up the tool? Or are you comparing them to me that knows how to program it? Like, where is the threshold? So that's something we've fought for, well, me particularly in Think Data forever over here and everywhere. But with our children, we're even worse because they have a mobile device in their hand. So we're like, oh, they're digitally skilled already. because
Yeah.
they can use TikTok or Instagram. Come on, that's not digital. That's not modern digital literacy. So, Jenny, I'll shut up because I feel like you have plenty to say.
No. That's exactly what I was thinking. And it's not just our kids, but it's easier for us to look at younger people and go, oh, they know how all this stuff works. And in point of fact, no. And we, I think, sometimes believe that if we teach people using computers that they become digitally literate, right? Like that's the whole idea. They're on a laptop all day, but if all you're doing is clicking go and using the arrow keys and entering some text, that's probably not going to do much for your future career.
Right.
Right. And a couple of years, maybe 3 years ago, Microsoft tried to create this definition that I saw was here for a while and then it went away. But the definition, it was specific to Power BI, was to divide the world into consumers and makers. Right. And so in Power BI, consumers are people who can open a report and read it and understand it. Maybe, throw on a filter or make a couple of minor changes. But consumers then are all we're training some of our folks to be when we look and we say that they're digitally literate or that they're data literate, is that they can look at a report. That's different than the skills that are required to be able to create a report, to be able to determine what data you want to represent. And I have a feeling that there's a lifelong income difference between those two skill sets.
Yeah, until you slice in the literacy level of the management and leadership.
We all know
I'm with you on the income, but I do believe that a very data literate, very data informed leadership position is like, if that's who you want to be, that's what you want to be. Very literate, very informed. You have to have a certain level of fluency. And I'm worried if our regular general population doesn't have it, then our leadership and management levels also behind. But nobody wants to really admit that or talk about that, but they deep down inside, they know it.
Well, according to Bill, 73 out of 4 self-report, managers saying, I don't know enough about data. I don't feel that I'm data literate in my job. That's so we have a problem across the board. And yes, I'm sure those managers are really well compensated despite their level of ignorance about data, but the vast majority of us don't end up in management.
Right.
In increasing numbers, we're ending up working for ourselves, right? Or working for small organizations. So that's more of a trend.
Yeah.
We can't all be hedge fund managers.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think it'd be interesting too, like in time, if we're successful in all of the different programs that exist to educate people in data, in time, we should be able to do more things, make more informed decisions, and this whole, like, we're data driven. Like, I would just throw up in my mouth when people would say data driven. Obviously, you're data driven. You don't have gas in your car. That data drives you to go put gas in your car. That isn't special, right? So it's like, do you want to be data driven? Because that means you may be data reactive as well.
Yeah.
Like, don't you want to be informed so you can get ahead of the decision? And that's the type of people that we intend to create and identify in our apprenticeships, people that want to go on and make those data informed decisions and grow up to be those leaders. Because again, we talk about this is the growth in the role. Well, if you have such a growth in the role for data professionals, you're also going to see an increased growth for data leadership and their skills. So our apprenticeship.
Someone had a question in the comments about what would a possible candidate for a data analyst, what certification, and I think that's a good time to talk about the CompTIA Data Plus.
I'm looking to see if I can.
Armando.
I think it's the one you just flipped up here for a second, Robin.
Oh, right here.
You got it. You're on it.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So certification definitely addresses some of these tests and questions, right? If someone has completed, like for example, CompTIA's Data Plus certification, and I highlight that one because that's the one in our boot camp, and we also authored the book on it. So of course we're fans of it. But if someone's gone through that test and has earned that credential, that tells you that they have gained some form of competency in those domains. Now, I will say, if you use certification as a method to determine competency, also look to see how they prepared to get certified. I might follow up with that. Like, what was your preparation for certification? Because sometimes people teach people to exam prep, dump it down in a week, and then go regurgitate it for a certification. I do not believe that ensures competency. That to me ensures recall. So if you do use certification as a test, I would also encourage to ask, how did they come about getting their certification? As a job interviewer, I would ask people, this is just generally something I would throw out there, and then I would ask Jenny and Bill if they have, and Daniel as well. But like, if you can't explain to me the details behind a VLOOKUP, and you give me some real weird VLOOKUP answer, it tells me a lot about your core fundamental understanding of data. I can't divulge all of our little assessments, but another one is the importance of having first and last name in individual columns. Like, it's really only one answer for that. There's really one answer for that. What is the benefit? And if you fail to answer that question effectively, I'm going back to your foundational skills. But I'm a believer in foundational skills, right? So it depends on the job interview. If it were a SQL related, I would have something prepared to not have them necessarily syntactically type out joins, but you would need to be able to conceptually tell me what results I'm going to get on a particular join type. Like, those are things that I would use to kind of gauge to see what I'm going to do next.
It's funny. That question is also almost like a perfect segue to our stated topic today about technical difficulties, because one of the questions I always ask when I was interviewing people was, tell me about the time when something went horribly wrong and what you did about it. Because then, it's not regurgitating, I learned how to do a join statement in SQL. It's, holy crap, this really complicated thing that I had to accomplish using SQL, and I couldn't figure it out. Oh, and eventually I figured out that if I did this, this, and this, that would solve the problem. Okay, good. You explained the problem. You explained a good solution. Sounds like you know what you're talking about. And to do that, obviously, it goes beyond just getting certified, and it sort of implies you've done work in the real world,
Right.
Which can be hard getting your first job. But even if that context, if it occurred while working on data problems as part of your certification process, that's okay. So yeah, a little bit of experience, even if it's in a minimal way, goes a long way towards showing me that you really know what you're doing.
Yeah, I think, and again, talking a little bit selfishly about Think Data boot camps and apprenticeship is we build in those challenge scenarios. We build in those team projects, because how do you know what you know or don't know if you're not doing some form of, here's a work product, now go perform this. Yeah. And those challenges can get so intensive that, they're light bulb moments for a lot of people that they can turn around and use in their interview. So definitely, I think a data analyst who is, I don't want to say classically trained, but has all the domain knowledge, should definitely be able to easily describe a data project from beginning to end state. No matter what that beginning and end state look like, they should be able to describe their process, their method, their approach throughout the whole thing. And yes, any technical difficulties that they may have faced or learned from. That question is important for a lot of reasons outside of just, determining a data analyst. That question is important because, is this person going to fit in with your current company's ability to deal with problems.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
if their answer is they freaked out and did this, like you would probably know that's not exactly what is going to be best for your team. It's like that's a gift that keeps on giving type question.
It's sort of like, funny you should mention that. Actually, that's why I'm out interviewing for a new job.
Exactly.
Because there's no way I can fix what's back of my desk.
So yeah, let's talk about technical difficulties because, you know, when we started doing Data Fundamentals Unpacked, our hope and goal was to share, I would say, some of the business skills in and around being a data professional. And dealing with technical difficulties, I think, is not just the thing that a data professional has to deal with. I think a technical professional has to deal with technical difficulties. We all have technical difficulties. So what happened to bring us here is that we brought everybody, we planned for everybody to come in. We're going to do this live stage, Data Fundamentals Unpacked, about building the data workforce. We're going to broadcast every bit of it out. And when the event was done, the venue let us know, and they handled this very professionally. I have the utmost respect for how they addressed this, that we weren't going to have the audio. And I was devastated, as everybody on this call, and especially Daniel Bishop knows, that we had lost that audio. And in the process of trying to figure out how to deal with the ramifications of that is what brought this episode about, because I was ultimately faced with, how do I deal with this technical difficulty, the loss of the audio? And it's important, I think, to use every moment as a teachable moment when you can. But it was important to recognize that it wasn't just the loss of the audio, because we had put all of this time and effort up to the point of the audio. And now it was lost. It was performed, but it was what it was intended to produce has now stopped. And then you have the other side of the audio loss, which is everything that was going to happen with all that content after the fact. Like, this was going to go out. This was going to be published here. We were going to send this note. And it's like, none of that's happening now.
It was going to be this month's Data Fundamentals Unpacked.
Yeah. Actually, we're going to broadcast it just a few days later. Not anymore.
Nope.
A few days later, I'm still processing, which I've learned a lot about myself in this. I also believe it's very valuable to have moments in your life that, you know, they're not fun. It's not the end of the world, but definitely is teachable about yourself as a leader on how you conduct yourself and how you handle yourself and where you go. So that's what brought this episode about, is a little bit of self-discovery, a lot of processing, some emotional development. I mean, I don't even know. I'm still very disappointed by the loss, because I would have loved to have been able to see my workforce presentation.
It was great, by the way. I did see it. I was there, and it was, and for me, it was the best part of the event.
I love that.
It was stunning.
I will never know. I'll never be able to dissect myself now. But that's okay. Like, that's just part of it. I did appreciate that the venue understood the loss. And so they did not compound my issues by handling it, you know, poorly on their side. They were there with us. And again, I appreciated all their response. But I did say, let's put this together and let's talk about how do we deal with technical difficulty. So let's spend our final moments here. And I'll talk more about our technical difficulty, but I think let's just start with, sometimes we have technical difficulties and everything is outside of our control. Like, we're participating in a project, we're a part of that project. something happens that we're out of control, what do we do? Like, what are our strategies when we face a technical difficulty and we don't have control? So, Bill, you got thoughts on that?
I do. And so I'll tell a little story. And I briefly mentioned it to Robin already earlier today. And I have to expand on it. I realized I left something out of that story, Robin. So many years ago, I was hired by the government of Dubai to create all of the technology for a big deal conference, sort of like Davos, but in Dubai. And the biggest project that I had ever done to date. What I forgot to tell you, Robin, is that we had a boatload of technical difficulties on the day of the event, days of the event. Now, in that particular case, talk about it being out of your control. All the problems were because, well, I shouldn't be blaming the client, but they're not a client anymore, and it's been a million years, so who cares? The fact is, they weren't really paying attention during the project. We couldn't get their attention until a few weeks before the event. So we did, like, the approvals were taking forever to happen. So we were a little bit behind on pretty much everything. So that was sort of on us because we should have pushed them harder or told them we just couldn't do it. The second thing that happened was that the Wi-Fi wasn't working in the venue. And so there were a lot of failures, like kiosks were going down, the little handheld device, which was a big deal back then, way, pre-iPhone, wasn't really working properly, but it's because the Wi-Fi wasn't working and that was somebody else's responsibility. But it still came down to we're getting yelled at when things aren't working right. So long story short, out of our control, the things aren't going well. As far as what I was able to do, I definitely stopped panicking and just tried to explain to people. We also did things like with the handheld device where we pre-cached all the information on the device. We were problem solving on the fly. We did a decent job given the situation. But here's the thing. The thing that I learned the most about dealing with technical difficulties that week wasn't dealing with our own technical difficulties, because that same week, the CTO of Pixar, Chief Technical Officer, guy in charge of all the technology at Pixar, told a story, which I will never forget, which was that literally, I think it was 2 weeks before Toy Story 2 was supposed to be released, they lost the entire movie. And so if anybody who's familiar with 3D, computer generated animation, it takes an insane amount of time to create that content. So essentially they model it, they render it, and the rendering can take literally hours and hours and hours to render one frame of a film. And a frame is 24 frames per second, thousands and thousands. So it's like, you go to a data farm and rent it out for months if they had to re-render this thing. There was just no way to get it done in time for the 2 weeks. And so the CTO was telling the story, and what he said was that he was actually the guy in charge of the backups. He was the guy who's supposed to be worried about this kind of thing when this event occurred. And so the fact that he was still the CTO says volumes about the culture at Pixar, the culture of understanding when things go wrong. It's okay. It's what do you do about it? And so there wasn't really a culture of real backups at the time. And so he was responsible for it. But in the end, from that day forward, obviously they had a much more robust backup strategy. They learned all kinds of good lessons from it, et cetera. But what was really, really interesting about it also was the fact that, Toy Story did come out 2 weeks later, just so you all know, the happy ending, which was that one of the people working on the video, on the movie, had brought all the rendered footage home on a laptop 2 or 3 nights before to watch it as they were working on some other new element. So by the sheer luck, it worked out okay. But I don't think that's why he didn't get fired. He didn't get fired because he handled it as best he could, even though there wasn't a great solution. And obviously they implemented best practices differently after that.
That's, yeah. And again, you think, okay, it's not just the loss of the one thing. It's what do you do about everything that's happened before to this point, and then what's happening after? It's just there's always these defining moments of the before and the after.
There better be.
Yeah. And I need to get to the after. I can just deal if I can get to the after. Here we are, but I said I learned a lot about myself in preparing for this episode. I learned a lot about my initial responses. Are you sure? Have we exhausted every avenue? Tell me what all else you've done. tell me what else you've considered. Like, I need to know, like, is there any hope? And then once I know there's no hope, I'm done. I'm able to, move on and make the next plan. So I know for me, dealing with technical difficulties, especially when you're dealing with the loss of something or something breaking or not going to be available, like my initial response is, are we sure?
Yeah.
And I got to get satisfaction on the are we sure? And then once I become satisfied that we are sure, then I'm able to operate on. Jenny, you got any thoughts? Or Daniel, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say what you said when you first asked the question. Like I was thinking what my first step would be, and like you just went through these series of questions that you asked, what can be salvaged? It's really the first step. If you had to group it into one phrase, would be information gathering. When technical difficulties happen, it's time to gather information. Can it be salvaged? Who do I need to notify? Things like that. Is there an alternative? Is there an alternative? And then you need to be able to clearly communicate how this affects everything else from a consultant, or if you're a data analyst in a data department and you have a project and you say you don't have permissions to the database that you need to create the report. Well, you need to be able to communicate to all of the stakeholders how this affects the timeline. So
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Why is that so difficult sometimes for people, though? I mean, I'm pretty bold. I'm pretty blunt. I mean, if y'all haven't figured that out in the last 3 years, I don't know, maybe. Some people, though, when it comes to communicating technical difficulties, they don't even want to go there. It's not a technical difficulty until I say it out loud to the boss, which isn't true. It's a technical difficulty the minute it's a technical difficulty. So why is it so hard for people to go and communicate technical difficulties, you think? I mean, we're years into this game, so we've built some skin up. But when you're early on,
culture plays a role, right? Like, this poor guy at Pixar, he's a junior guy at this point. He's got to tell Steve Jobs they lost the freaking movie. Are you kidding me? But apparently Steve Jobs, when it came to things like that, they had a good culture. The culture was, okay, kind of what you and Daniel were just talking about. First of all, are we sure? Second of all, is there anything we can do? And you were going to send the files to audio experts to see if they could salvage it. We're thinking of everything we can possibly think of. And then eventually we accept the loss and we move on and figure out what to do. And so company culture has a lot to do with that. If you're in a company with a terrible culture where you get screamed at and, you do get fired and everything horrible does happen when you communicate the problems, there's kind of nothing you can do about that. I mean, I'll tell you, the first part of my story, the client was not happy. And I got to tell you, it was mostly their fault. Now, I couldn't tell them that in that moment, but that was the truth. I also did own my part in it, but I did communicate with them. As soon as I knew that things were not going well, I communicated with them because they needed to know, regardless of where the blame falls, et cetera. And so, it was a reality. There were kiosks not working and I had to tell them, and boy, I was not looking forward to it, but you do. And then you face whatever you face. And then that's another learning opportunity, because if it's a horrible culture, a horrible company, whatever, all right, maybe it's not a place you want to work, because you're not going to grow there. You're not going to learn there. And by the way, it's going to happen again down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the assumption of perfection is too high. I worked for, I was an embedded consultant for a long time in a Fortune 500 company, and through a leadership transition. And their former CEO was somebody who walked the hallways, and at headquarters, and knew everybody by name, even knew consultants by name. Would say hi to everybody. He'd stop. One of his deals was he'd stop and he'd go, "What's our mission?" And if you could spout off the corporate mission statement, which was 3 sentences long, he'd hand you $100 bill and keep going. So it's stuff like that. Like he was a popular guy. And then I watched the transition when he left for a CEO position in another company, and the new guy who came in, within 2 years, there was bad news, and people would go, "I don't want to be the person who has to tell Al that." And it was just so frank, like vice president saying, "You can't be the person who brings that news," because leadership changed from being sort of this friendly, really competent, but worker friendly place to shoot the messenger style.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you learn from that. You watch like the trail of bodies being dragged out of your boss's office, and it does give you thought about how much you want to be presenting information about what's going wrong.
Also, depending on where you work and how regulated your industry is, also controls how much you can communicate and who you communicate to.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think it's also important for us to say, like, universally, you need to look at, you know, yes, it's corporate culture, but also corporate policy. Like, you know, you don't want to go be the person who tells something you shouldn't tell out loud, only to discover you really should have told your most immediate supervisor first. So yeah, take, you know, culture and policy. Sorry to be the person to bring up policy, but policy, it's really important, right? Because you get yourself into, you know, you're going to do the right thing only to discover you just said it out loud and you weren't supposed to. So
Right.
it's kind of, you know, technical difficulties is kind of a balance.
But I think there's something to be said for if you're in a room with a lot of people, all of whom know something has to be said, and they're all trying to figure out who they're going to offer up as the scapegoat for this executive level conversation, that's probably someplace you want to think about leaving. You know, because everything changes right now. You know, we're in an environment where fail forward is really kind of part of what we do every day, right? The tools change. You try new things because you're encouraged to try new things. Something works, something doesn't. I think at some level, if you never do something that really bombs, you probably are sort of underutilizing your creative portion of your work life, right?
Right.
You do something, you go, wow, that didn't work as I intended. Okay, but I learned these 5 things from it. Like I was thinking, Bill, in your Pixar story, I'm sure one of the things that Pixar learned also was that they had employees taking videos of their movies that were almost completely done home on laptops, right?
Exactly.
I don't think that happens anymore either. So there were lots of learning opportunities in that story.
Yeah, you know how that conversation went down. You know,
we would have fired you for this, but
exactly, you saved our asses. But
next time you're in trouble, but this time,
that's right. That's
this
right.
Time you're okay.
Next time you're in trouble, you're going to lose your job and your house. But this time, we're really glad we let you do this.
So funny.
You know, so unpacking, and that's another thing I want to mention. We were talking about the terrible news is sometimes also there's a place after you take it all in that I think there's a necessary place for a pause, because it's real easy to want to rush to a solution. Like it's something you think you can fix, maybe not in the case of there's no audio for your video. But here's something that maybe we could fix, and you end up fixing symptoms rather than fixing problems.
Yeah.
You know, and now you've invested time in the solution, but you're solving the wrong problem.
Right.
That got you to where you are. So I think there's also a place for almost like a meditative piece that says, how did this happen? And do we know everything about that yet? Or do we know enough about that to start figuring out how to fix?
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah. If you're in a you know, a significant technical difficulty, struggling to get it out, and it has a massive impact, you know, some organizations do so they'll do a debrief where they talk about, you know, everything that's going to make everything better. But like if it's really bad, some organizations adopt a root cause analysis process where you do root cause analysis to figure out literally what is the root of this and how did we get here. And it's less about like the individual thing that happened and more about everything that happened up to that point to cause that to happen. So like if you're into that, there's whole roles dedicated to root cause analysis if you enjoy that type of information work.
Yep.
So we're getting
closer.
closer.
There's a job where you get to say who the fault belongs to.
I don't know if it, yes, it's called root cause analysis. And I don't know what the job title of the practitioner of it is, but it's usually multiple people in organizations and teams that, they have different different parts of it that they can dissect. You're definitely going to find it where people are building, like engineering firms that are building things. They definitely have root cause analysis because they want to avoid that at all costs, right? Because again, you have what you lose beforehand that's already done, and what would you lose on the backside. What's your best advice to give a data professional on discussing and addressing technical difficulties? If you had to give one piece of advice, what would your advice be? Tough one, huh? I'll go first.
Go. That's good. That's helpful.
Don't call a flag on the play too early. Don't decide it's a technical difficulty and then go react. Really confirm that you have covered every possibility. So when you face telling someone like me that you've exhausted all strategies and we've talked through it, then I know you've already done that process. You also don't want to be the person that says, hey, this is a problem, this is an issue, and then someone go Google and be like, no, it's not. So do your diligence is my number one piece of advice. Anybody else got anything to add to that? I hope so. Number one advice for addressing technical difficulties.
I mean, I would say that's a really good one. And I'm going to steal what Ginny said earlier to add to it, which is, I love the way you phrase that, Ginny. Don't address symptoms, address the actual core problem, which does require that meditative moment. So it's sort of tied to what you just said, Robin. Like, you got to take that moment, do your due diligence. Is this really a problem? And what is the actual problem as best you can? And by the way, whenever you talk about problems, you should come to the table with a solution or a conversation about solutions, which requires due diligence in the first place. And so you may not have the answer, but boy, you should be coming with, okay, here are 3 things that we could try, or 3 ways of talking about getting to solutions with your team, supervisors, whoever.
I think that's definitely valuable advice.
There's something about how you think about technical difficulties. And I'm going to just kind of struggle as I try to flesh out how I think about this. But sometimes the goal in some organizations or in some teams is to find out who was to blame. And I like to kind of move up a level to what in our systems allowed this problem to happen. It's because people always make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We think we were doing one thing and we're doing another. We thought we put sugar in our own coffee and we put it in somebody else's and they're not happy. Humans make mistakes. We're not perfect beings. We're perfectly imperfect beings. So the idea of what in our moving forward, this doesn't help you in the current technical difficulty, except I think you can have better conversations about what's wrong when you're not all looking to finger 1 or 2 people and have them bear the responsibility for it.
Yeah.
So what in our systems put us in a position where this could happen? Occasionally you are in a setting where somebody's mismatched their skills, right? Aren't necessarily matched for the job, but most of the time people are trying to do a pretty decent job. And unless there's a pattern of the same person or same team making the same type of mistake over and over again, I'm usually trying to figure out how to elevate it to a systems level conversation for future work. Like Pixar saying, we should probably have regular backups. That's the systems approach. The non-systems approach is, somebody accidentally deleted our movie this time, and the next time it's this new person accidentally, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's in there. I think there's something that makes me feel good, kind of assuages how I feel in the moment, to go into more of a planning mode and less into a grief mode, because that's a real part of some technical difficulties. You have to allow some time for grief.
Yeah.
You won't get that time back that you spend. If Toy Story had come out a year late, there would be people whose work was in the first one that was never in the remake. So there's grief stuff, right? But once you get past that, to me, it's trying to focus on how we change our systems to better support people to have less of an experience of technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Just realize that the abbreviation for significant technical difficulty is STD, which means that they're bad overall.
Just means generally
bad. You just want those in your life to the extent that you can pull that off. All right.
I love it. Well, we are at our time. So I just want to tell y'all how much I appreciate you coming to have this discussion today. I loved having you in the Magic City. I hope we can travel other cities and do it again. I also love to have you come back to Birmingham again. I know you guys were very well received here, and we really appreciated you.
And the burritos.
Supporting us. And there's the burritos. And the T-shirts.
And the barbecue. The
T-shirts. Oh, look.
Oh, man.
Yes.
I won't do that because I'm not wearing mine.
All right, guys. Y'all have a happy
Robin, my last thing. You didn't ask my last thing. I would say.
Oh, what's your last thing? Of course I didn't.
To wrap it all up so you can be calm. The technical difficulty is inevitable. It's just going to happen in technology. So that's the first thing you should tell yourself, to kind of calm and be able to have that meditative moment and gather information and questions, is that technical difficulties are inevitable. Even when you do figure out that one and how to avoid it, there's always something else.
That is an amazing way to end this episode. So we will see you guys after the new year.
Yep. Be well. However you celebrate, enjoy.